It usually starts like a common flu. A sudden fever creeps in, your head begins to pound, and your body aches in ways that make you think it's just another seasonal virus. Maybe you blame a recent trip, a change in the weather, or simply overwork, but a few days later, something strange happens. Your joints swell, every movement burns. You can't grip a pen, open a door, or even walk without wincing. Weeks pass and the pain refuses to leave. What seemed like an ordinary illness turns into something much more sinister. This isn't some newly discovered disease nor a forgotten relic from the past. It's chikungunya, a viral infection that has, for decades, quietly jumped continents, infiltrated cities, and embedded itself in communities without the attention or alarm it warrants. It doesn't kill in waves or cause bleeding like Ebola. It doesn't fill hospital ICUs like COVID. But it disables, disfigures, and lingers in bodies, in lives, and increasingly, across borders. How does a disease spread across the globe in silence? Why do we overlook it despite its crippling effects? And more importantly, what does chikungunya's hidden journey reveal about the vulnerabilities in our global health systems? To understand this, we must return to its roots, to forgotten villages, mutated mosquitoes, and the intersection of climate, poverty, and complacency. We must follow its trail not just through biology, but through history, society, and science, because sometimes, what doesn't scream can still bring the world to its knees. The name chikungunya comes from the Makonde language, spoken by an ethnic group in southeastern Tanzania and northern Mozambique. It translates loosely to "that which bends up," referring to the contorted posture of those suffering from severe joint pain. When the virus was first identified in 1952, during an outbreak in what was then Tanganyika, now Tanzania, it caused such debilitating pain that victims were literally bent over, unable to stand straight. But while science gave the virus a name, its true origin remains more elusive. For decades, chikungunya was largely confined to sub-Saharan Africa and parts of Asia, lurking in the tropics, occasionally flaring up in small communities, then disappearing without fanfare. It was often misdiagnosed as dengue due to overlapping symptoms, high fever, rashes, body aches. But what set chikungunya apart and what made it so feared in the communities that knew it was its cruel aftershock? Joint pain that could last not days, but months. In some cases, even years. Unlike the high-profile diseases that grab headlines and funding, chikungunya quietly spread through under-resourced regions, often ignored by global health authorities. It lived in the blind spots of public health surveillance, moving with mosquitoes and, increasingly, with humans. Still, for many years, the world assumed it was a local problem, a tropical nuisance that would never breach the borders of developed nations. That assumption was a grave mistake. By the early 2000s, chikungunya had begun to evolve. Mutations in the virus allowed it to infect a new species of mosquito, Aedes albopictus, also known as the Asian tiger mosquito. Unlike its cousin Aedes aegypti, which prefers warm urban environments, albopictus could thrive in cooler climates, suburban areas, and even temperate zones. It was the perfect carrier for global expansion. Suddenly, the virus was no longer shackled to equatorial zones. It had found a new passport. It wasn't an explosion. It was a slow burn, a steady, invisible creep across borders. In 2005, the island of Réunion, a French territory in the Indian Ocean, experienced a devastating outbreak. Over 266, people, more than one-third of the population, were infected. Hospitals were overwhelmed. The military was deployed to spray insecticide. The outbreak revealed something new and unsettling. A mutation in the virus, known as Eoniatu 126V, had made it far more efficient at infecting Aedes albopictus. This single change shifted the epidemic into high gear. The virus hitched a ride on travelers and cargo ships, arriving in India by 2006. There, it infected over 1 million people in just a few months. From India, it spread eastward to Thailand, Malaysia, and the Philippines, and westward toward the Middle East. In 2007, Italy reported its first locally transmitted chikungunya outbreak, something previously thought impossible in a temperate European climate. That same year, cases appeared in France. By 2013, chikungunya made its grand entrance into the Western Hemisphere. It struck the Caribbean with unexpected ferocity, infecting hundreds of thousands across islands like St. Martin, Puerto Rico, and the Dominican Republic. Within a year, it had crossed into Central and South America, eventually reaching Brazil, Colombia, and Venezuela. Even Florida reported locally acquired cases. What made the spread so rapid and so hard to contain wasn't just globalization, It was the perfect storm of urban overcrowding, climate change, and mosquito adaptability. Urbanization created dense human populations where mosquitoes could thrive. Climate change expanded mosquito habitats to areas that had never seen them before. Warmer winters, wetter summers, and standing water in cities made ideal breeding grounds. And then there was human movement, cheap air travel, mass tourism, refugee crises, and trade routes. Chikungunya didn't need a visa. It traveled light, fast, and invisibly. Yet despite all this, the world barely noticed. News outlets might mention an outbreak in passing. International health agencies flagged it, then moved on to the next crisis. Unlike Ebola or COVID-19, Chikungunya wasn't catastrophic enough to spark panic, but it was just disruptive enough to quietly ruin lives, economies, and health systems, especially in poorer regions. And all the while, the mosquitoes kept biting. For many, the worst of chikungunya begins not during the fever, but after it subsides. Initially, symptoms resemble those of the flu: sudden high fever, rash, headaches, and muscle aches. But then the virus begins to reveal its true character: fierce and unrelenting joint pain that can affect hands, wrists, knees, and ankles. Victims describe it as burning, stabbing, or grinding pain, making even simple movements agonizing. In some cases, the swelling is visible, the joints stiff and misshapen. Elderly patients or those with pre-existing conditions are especially vulnerable, but even young, healthy adults may suffer long-term effects. What makes chikungunya so insidious is that it often masquerades as something else. Doctors in non-endemic regions might misdiagnose it as rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, or even depression-induced fatigue. Blood tests for the virus aren't always available or accurate during certain stages, especially in regions where the disease is new. And without confirmation, treatment is reduced to guesswork, often just painkillers and patience. This chronic phase can last weeks, months, or even years. In some cases, the immune system doesn't fully shut off after the virus clears. Instead, it continues to attack the joints in a kind of autoimmune loop, similar to how rheumatic fever can follow a simple strep infection. Some patients are left permanently disabled, unable to return to work or resume basic daily functions. Despite this, chikungunya rarely garners attention from pharmaceutical companies or global health policymakers. It doesn't kill in large numbers. It doesn't make for shocking headlines. There's no vaccine, no antiviral cure, and little funding for research. Patients are often told to wait it out while their lives shrink around them. In regions where outbreaks are common, the economic toll is staggering. Workers miss weeks of labor. Farmers can't harvest crops. Health clinics are overrun. Yet the virus remains outside the realm of urgency, largely because it strikes hardest in places the world is used to overlooking. And so it spreads, not just through blood and mosquitoes, but through silence and neglect. The world has a hierarchy of fear when it comes to disease. Some illnesses ignite global panic, others stir mild concern, and many, like chikungunya, simply fall through the cracks. This isn't due to a lack of danger, but a lack of spectacle. Chikungunya doesn't bleed like Ebola, doesn't suffocate like COVID, and doesn't paralyze like Zika. It maims, quietly. It disables silently. It is not dramatic, it is persistent. And in a media landscape fueled by shock and urgency, that persistence is its invisibility cloak. Part of the issue lies in the way global health prioritizes crisis over continuity. Diseases that kill quickly and visibly trigger funding, policy, and headlines. But those that slowly corrode quality of life rarely do. There is no dramatic death toll, no quarantine cities, no morgues overflowed. Just millions of people waking up every morning with joints that won't bend, jobs they can't return to, and doctors who shrug and say, "We can't do much." Another factor is geography. Chikungunya's epicenters, Africa, South Asia, the Caribbean, parts of Latin America, are regions that have long endured underfunded healthcare and minimal international spotlight. When an outbreak hits these areas, it is often written off as part of the usual burden of disease, and when it reaches richer countries, it usually infects only a handful enough to cause mild alarm, but not mobilization. But what happens when a warming planet and global travel combine to make those handful of cases into thousands? What happens when mosquitoes once confined to the tropics begin appearing in Europe, North America, and East Asia, not just during heat waves, but year-round? That moment may already be upon us. In recent years, Aedes albopictus has been documented in over 30 U.S. states, throughout southern Europe, and even parts of Japan and South Korea. As climate shifts, so do the boundaries of vector-borne diseases. What was once a tropical illness is now knocking on the doors of places once considered safe. And yet funding remains scarce. Public awareness campaigns are few. Most people still have no idea what chikungunya is until it's already in their bloodstream. Chikungunya is not a disease of the past or the poor. It is a warning, an evolving signal that the borders we once trusted to contain illness are blurring, and that our selective attention to health crises may be our undoing. It reveals the fragile scaffolding of global health preparedness, reactive rather than proactive, driven by headlines rather than need. Though it does not kill in great numbers, chikungunya kills certainty. It robs people of movement, of livelihood, of trust in their own bodies. And yet, the silence surrounding it continues. Medical silence, political silence, social silence. It is a silence built on the privilege of ignorance, that if it hasn't reached you yet, it isn't real. But the truth is, we live in an era where no disease is local for long. A mosquito bite in one hemisphere can lead to disability in another. The next outbreak might not be somewhere else. It might be in your city, your home, your joints. And if that happens, what will you wish we had done differently? So perhaps the real question isn't whether chikungunya will come, it already has. The question is, will we keep pretending it's not here? Because viruses don't wait for awareness, and silence is the most dangerous symptom of all.